So everyone here knows it, obviously. Everyone here knows that I'm Adrien Fiorucci, but in case there's somebody on that camera that doesn't know it, I want to state that. And I have been doing spiritual and relational life coaching now for almost a year. It was May 18th, I looked it up. It's May 18th that I actually came out of the spiritual closet, as I said, and I stood here pretty much and I said, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I think I'm meant to do. So it's been quite a ride. I've enjoyed it tremendously. I have noticed that it is almost a constant act of vulnerability to put myself in this position on so many ways that I couldn't even begin to describe. One of which is trying something new. I mean, everybody knows me as Adrien the Contractor. You know, it's an interesting thing to try to reinvent yourself at 47 years old. So, and I didn't realize how much vulnerability that was going to take, but it really does. So, I just saw a young gentleman walking in here. So, which just made my night, I think. You all made my night, though. You all are totally made my night. So, the reason that I am here is to share this thing that I am very passionate about. And I want to kind of talk about, just take a moment, because spiritual relational life coach is kind of like, what the hell does that mean? You know, it's a tough thing, especially the word spiritual. I think it's so vague. I think it's intentionally vague. But I'm going to try to see if I can't get a little context to it, a little taste of what I mean. And I'm going to do that by saying a couple of things. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm going to start with the sentence that, though I am not you, I am not separate than you. The subtlety in that sentence is very profound. I could spend the whole evening, I could spend a series of evenings talking about that. But though I am not you, I am not separate than you. That sort of nuance and subtlety is what I mean when I say spiritual. And obviously you can see relational falls into that sentence too. It's a very important thing to contemplate. And I find too that as I share these deeper things with people, these things that is so obvious in a certain way, we know this in a way. That's why you say a sentence like that and it makes sense. You kind of understand it intuitively because we know it, but we don't look at it. We're so busy saying, oh, you're over there and I'm over here. End of story. I mean, that's it, you know. But we know it's not that way if we take a moment, especially when somebody says something like that. I think when I read that, by the way, it's not mine. I wish it was mine, but it's not mine. You know, and when I read that, it did that to me. I was like, wow, holy cow. Another one that I talk about a lot, and it will come up in this talk, is the difference between force and power. And it's fun. I love this too because as soon as I put those two words together, you almost know exactly what I mean. There's a difference between force and power. They're synonyms in a way, but they couldn't be more different. And that subtlety is important, and it's something that we don't pay attention to a lot. So this is the vulnerability being the portal to power. By the way, notice I didn't say the portal to force, right? You could just right away, it doesn't sound good. It's like, that's not right. You're really going to teach us how to be forceful. That's not a karate class. But, so in those ways, these are ways in which I would say I'm trying to, these are the things that mean a lot to me. So here I am standing before you and who knows who online, making myself vulnerable. And one of the reasons that it is vulnerable, again, is because I care a lot about it. So I want to say something about how, for me, it is scary, it is intense, but it is enlivening and it is exciting. To some of you out there, it would be terrifying. It's like, get up here and talk, right? For me, I do get a kick out of it. I get jazzed from it, you know? And I use this metaphor a lot. It's kind of like the roller coaster. A lot of people love roller coasters, and a lot of people are terrified of them. The roller coaster is the roller coaster. That's the ride. What's the difference? The person's perspective and interpretation of that. And it's so different that the person who enjoys it gets all kinds of good feedback, all kinds of good biochemistry comes out of that. And the one that's terrified, It's terrible for them. It's terrible for their bodies to go on that ride. But the difference is only a perception. Another example of this is a story I heard from Pema Chodron once. I don't know if anybody knows who Pema Chodron is. She's a pretty famous Buddhist teacher. And she was talking about, she was on a cruise ship with her daughter, I believe. And if I'm messing this story up, I apologize, but it's something like this. And her daughter was trying to coax her to come to the bow of the cruise ship and take a look, because you're standing 3-4 stories off the water. Apparently, Pema Chodron was scared of heights, and she's like, I'm not. Finally, she coaxes her over. She's like, come on, it's so cool. And so Pema steps over, she looks over the edge, and she's like, oh my God, my stomach, I get butterflies in my stomach, my head's spinning, my heart's pounding. And her daughter looks at her, she says, that's really funny, Ma, that's exactly how I feel. One person's invigorated by it, digging it. The other person's terrified. These sorts of subtle differences are obviously, as you can see, they're tremendous. They're tremendous differences. So what I want to see if we can't do here tonight, and if I can do this to one person, to shift their perspective on vulnerability a little bit. What it's about, what it means, and what it has to offer. There's so much. I picked that title very, very purposefully, It is a portal. It is a portal to authentic personal power. And when we have that, hopefully you'll see, different from force, it changes our lives, So here I am, making myself vulnerable. And let's acknowledge too, by the way, right off the bat, I think vulnerability is not fun. It just doesn't feel that great. There's something about it that is uncomfortable, right? Can make us feel uneasy, can make us feel ill-prepared or defenseless, can make us feel weak even. That's a very common concept of what vulnerability means, frail and weak. Of course, the truth is, if we willingly experience vulnerability, it's anything but weakness, anything but cowardness. It's courage. It takes a lot of courage to willingly participate and experience vulnerability. So what I standing here before you, making myself vulnerable, and I was thinking about this. I'm thinking, well, I could do two things about this if I wanted to shift that. If I wanted to try to limit my vulnerability, from my perspective, I could do two things to do it. I could, one, not care so much about what it is I'm about to say. Just kind of limit how much I really put my feeling and caring about it into it. That would limit my vulnerability. I could also, maybe even more successfully, if I didn't give a shit what you guys thought about it. If I came up here and I said, I'm just going to say it, and whatever they think, I could care less. That would limit my vulnerability. I want to say right now that I'm going to do my best not to do that. Because I do care tremendously about the subject. I care tremendously about every single person in this room. And I care what you think. And I'm hoping, like I said, that maybe we could shift our perspective a little bit on what it means to be vulnerable. So, that being said, I think to journey into vulnerability is a very treacherous path, right? So a lot of us just do our best to avoid it, period. And I've been writing a new book, actually, and I'm really excited about it, and I'm quite a ways into it, and I'm writing about this subject matter. Ironically, it wasn't conceived that way, it just happened. So I started writing about what most of us do to avoid vulnerability. And in common psychological terms or psychiatric terms, it would be considered boundaries. This is a healthy thing for the most part, and certainly considered very healthy in most psychiatry. To have boundaries is an important part of being a human being and knowing how to set them and maintain them and what they are. And I'm going to say some stuff, and I don't want to make it sound like they are important. But I'm going to say a lot that's going to make it sound like they're not. And I would say, if we can just clarify this subtle difference right here too, is that in my mind, boundaries would never be the objective. They would never be a goal. Do we want to live with a bunch of walls around us? Is that how we want to deal with life? It's important at times. I want to stress that, right? But this boundaries concept is a very strong limitation on what life is and what can be. Now, boundaries are important when we don't have authentic power and when we don't have that sense. And we can work our way to authentic power by letting down boundaries. This is part of what I'm going to try to point out. So I'm writing in my book, and I'm trying to figure out how to talk about this. And I came up with this metaphor, and I was kind of happy. It was just kind of fun. So because they're boundaries, they're borders. And I came up with three sort of archetypes, if you will. One would be the barbed wire fence. This is a person we know. We'll get into this briefly. The other is the white picket fence. And the other is the invisible fence. These are all different ways in which we try to protect ourselves from vulnerability, honestly, from feeling that sense of something that's just kind of icky. So barbed wire fence. We're just going to go quick here. This person is the kind of person that pushes their views. Very forceful personality. Always knows what's right, always knows how things should be, always makes sure that they are that way, they get what they want, they push against life. This is where they're using force. Okay? Anyways, the other kind of way that this can kind of manifest in a person too is the one I said that I could have chosen here today, that I don't give a shit attitude. That sort of, biker, if you will, or, B word if you're, I just don't care. I don't care what you think. I don't care what I do. I don't care how life is. This is a way of staving off vulnerability. Move on, white picket fence. White picket fence is more the person who is a pleaser. Usually very active. Always painting that fence. They're always keeping it white. They're always keeping it going. They're keeping the show on. They're trying to, they love to fit in. They love to be loved. They love to, all those sorts of things. I think we all know these people. By the way, too, it's important that we all have a little bit of all this. This is a type, right? So the point is, nobody's usually exactly in one of these things. But they help to see, and hopefully it'll come up later where you'll see maybe the use of this a little bit. Because we need to be mindful of this in ourselves in order to bridge the gap, in order to enter into the portal of vulnerability. So the invisible fence, this is the person, you could call it the silent fence, but we don't have silent fences. This is the person who's quiet, very meek, always keeps inside, never wants to be in the limelight, will capitulate to just about anything as long as you don't make them choose, make them, answer, make them stand out. That's the person who would be utterly terrified to stand up here right now, right? And this is, funny enough, a way in which they avoid vulnerability. And that is one of my favorite parts about this whole thing, too. Because I've made the point already, but I really want to emphasize it. There are three very different types. There are three very different approaches to life. But they all stem from exactly the same impetus. They're trying to avoid feeling vulnerable, feeling weak, feeling exposed. They're all caused from the same source in that weird way, which is, I think, you don't see it, right? You see the guy with the tattoos and on the bike and, he's a tough guy. I mean, he's not afraid of anything. That guy is utterly terrified of being vulnerable. More so than the meek person sometimes, put in certain situations, funny enough. It's really ironic, because again, it's one of those subtle things that, we don't think about enough. We don't pay attention to enough. So, those are the three archetypes, if you will, that I'm espousing that can get in the way of vulnerability. So, actually, Jade, if you would now hand out, my daughter's going to hand us some pamphlets. It was recommended that I should have something to look at instead of my ugly face the whole time. So there's some pretty colors. They're packages, baby. Yeah, it's okay. So, yeah, I told you could do it that way too, for sure. So hopefully it came up online too, because my son's clever enough to figure that out. And I certainly wouldn't have been. If we look at the very top there, it's a crude visual. Yeah, I'm not great at this. I need an artist. I do. I actually did think... You could thank her right there. You can thank her right there. See, you guys are in sync there. So I could definitely use help with that. But we start off on top. We got life and experience, and it's trying to come through. Okay? Now, we got borders on the top, boundaries, on the top. And there's a line on that very top thing there from the boundaries. Now, a good way I feel like that you could think of this is like almost like sand trickling down. And each grain of sand is an experience, if you will, or a person, or a relationship, or anything like that. But it's trying to get through. As I was writing in that book I was talking about, I realized I added this right at the last minute because I'm like, God, I can't believe I didn't have this in there. I mean, I knew it, but as I was writing, it's one of the beautiful parts about writing, which, by the way, journaling is fantastic. Journal, write. It's good. It brings up things inside you. Willingness. We've all been vulnerable, by the way. We have all experienced vulnerability. If we don't do it willingly, we don't get shit from it. We just feel like crap. You have to willingly embrace vulnerability for it to do what I'm about to espouse here, to actually go through the portal of vulnerability and get this. So if we imagine that, the way that we could, this is, by the way, as I already said, I mean, making poopy diaper comments about boundaries is probably not the nicest way to do it. But this is where boundaries are useful. They're there. We all have them. We all have them. We have to remember that. But how we might think about dealing with it is loosening it, making it a little porous, maybe. Because if we use the sand in that way too, right? We let certain things in. We start with things we can handle. Does that make sense? So we let the sand trickle down, and some of it stays out. And there may be things that will stay out for the rest of our life. There's just certain people and certain things that are just beyond us, perhaps. You know what I mean? And that's fine. This is fine. But the goal would be to let as much in as we can. Why? Because as we let it enter through that border, the boundaries, it falls into willingly. I noticed it was starting to catch up on me here. When we do it willingly, isn't that weird that it would just all of a sudden start? Dave Peters is watching us right now going, you should have done this. Let me rephrase that. I hope Dave Peters is watching this now, and he's saying that. Okay, so can you still hear me? Okay. So as we let things come in, they fall into the portal because we did so willingly. We did so willingly, and it falls into that funnel, and it builds. And the first thing we get, the first reward we get from vulnerability is connection. And as it's falling down and seeping into us, and as we allow it more and we're willing to, it's a very intimate connection, which is what I want to have with you guys here tonight, by the way. That's why I don't want to put up any boundaries if I can. I want to be as vulnerable as I can humanly possibly be, because I want to have an intimate connection with you guys. As it falls down, you can see it too, right? Has anybody ever done that with sand on the beach, and you can make those really cool, fun castles, right? And of course the bottom is always bigger as we move on. We get authentic personal power. It's a counterintuitive thing. It's another subtle, nuanced thing. Why? How? What does power have to do with icky feelings and all of a sudden intimate connection? It has everything to do with it. It has everything to do with it. One of the reasons being, one of the most obvious reasons, I think, once you start thinking about it, is you didn't want to feel it. It's a muscle in that way. It was weak. There was resistance there. A gentleman here could definitely, relate to building muscle, I think, right? So when you do that, you got to tear it. It's got to burn a little bit. And by the way, tell me vulnerability doesn't burn. It burns a little bit. But when we willingly experience that, we begin to build muscle, if you will, authentic personal power muscle. And we get to sense that we can do this. This is one of those things that I just went and showed all these people, all these different ways that people are avoiding this. And yet, if we experience this willingly, we learn it's not so bad. Not only is it not so bad, I feel more connected to you. I just had a friend had an experience like this, going through just a ton of stuff. Overwhelmed with stuff. I mean, I could see it on their face, you know. And they had shared it with me a little bit, but they actually went on a walk with a friend. And I think they just needed to get it out more. And so they just kind of spilled it all out on this friend. And this friend listened very carefully, very, very gently, very beautifully. And funny enough, of course, the person felt better. There was some sort of release. There was some sort of, there was intimate connection, which all of a sudden you don't feel so alone. You don't feel so isolated, right? But then a really funny, fun, beautiful thing happened. That person turned around and started sharing some seriously difficult stuff that they were going through. Why? Because that person presented vulnerability, and vulnerability begets vulnerability. And why am I saying this too? This is what happens in relationships. And let me rephrase this. This is what can happen in relationships. But when we feel powerless, when we feel lost, when we feel confused, when we have no understanding of what's going on, it's really, really hard to do that. And that's where we turn to boundaries, because we just don't know what else to do. And honestly, it's sometimes there isn't anything else to do, This is why sometimes life coaching or something like that is important too, to actually have somebody help you see what else there is there and how to go about doing it. This isn't a sales pitch, but it just came up. So, this is a very difficult thing like that, because the feeling is so uncomfortable, we rarely want to have it. But if we're willing to, and again, okay, so let's go into a scenario. Let's say we're in a marriage that, actually, that one's too much. We're in a friendship that's very challenging. Very challenging friendship. And maybe it's not even a friendship, it's a coworker, like you don't have the choice. Like you work next to this person every damn day. I'm not telling you to go there on Monday and just open yourself up to this person and make yourself completely vulnerable and just lay it all out there, and because that's an invitation to get crushed. And the thing is, we do that, we shut it down, right? We shut it down if we do that. But to realize that there is a way in which maybe we could let a little in. Just make it a little more porous, because more than likely, if this is a very challenging relationship that we've had for a long, long time, we've got some serious boundaries up. Some, the barbed wire fence doesn't quite call it, right? I mean, I won't even go there. We get some serious walls. So if we could just ease it up a little bit. Slow and steady, that is wins the race thing, is so true. And it's so the right way to go. Plus, that person is not going to know what the hell you're doing. You go in there and you just start laying it all out on them. They're not going to respond probably like you'd like to think. And even if they did, it's probably be fake. It's too much too fast. It's the same thing in a marriage. I avoided that one because it's hard. But it can work like that in a marriage. If there's been a great distance that's gone on for a long time, you're not going to span that chasm right away. It's a little bit at a time. Willingness, though. Willingness makes it happen. I was just talking to Steve over there, and he was talking about peeling onions, and that's sort of what we're talking about here, It's like it's a slow peeling away, a slow letting go. And because, too, by the way, every time we do that, the sand's falling, and believe it or not, especially when we willingly, knowingly do it, we're building authentic personal power. And we get a sense that I can do this. That's why you don't want to rush into it, because if you do that too quick, you're gonna fall off the wagon, if you will. It's not going to work. Nice and slow. This is the way. So, one of the things I also wanted to point out about deep, intimate connection, because authentic personal power is the goal, but it's almost only the goal because of the incredible reward of deep, intimate connection. I've done a lot of searching. Everybody knows this about me in this room, I think. It's just something I've always been passionate about, as I already expressed. And in all my searching, and in all my wondering and reading and thinking and praying and meditating, connection is the closest thing to purpose that I can find. When we feel, and how too, when we feel connected, deeply connected, we don't feel alone. We don't feel fear. We don't feel confusion. I mean, all you got to do is think about a time that you really felt that way, and you never feel those things. They have no place there. Now, when you mix that with authentic personal power, where are you going? I mean, you're like a rock, you know? But you're a rock that lets things in. You know, you're not a rock that keeps things out. Nothing moves you. Nothing moves you where you can't deal with it. So that way you can let it in. This is when, the more we do this, the more we can get rid of boundaries. If we don't do this, we can't get rid of boundaries. If we don't build authentic personal power. It's critical. Now, this is not the only way in which we can build authentic personal power, but this is one of the best ways. And it's one of the natural ways that life has given us. If we just take the backward step, as they say, and I think it's in Zen, or the counterintuitive move, which is that vulnerability feels like crap, do it anyways, you know. There's lots of life that's like that, of course, right? I think we know this. Much of life is like that. The things that, you know, it's like you try to tell your kids all the time, right? You know, sweets are great, but, you know, you can't live on them, right? I mean, it's not going to work. They taste great, I know, and this doesn't taste so great, but, you know, you can acquire a taste to these things too, right? I mean, Brussels sprouts and kale are two of my favorite things these days, you know. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Who would have thought that vulnerability could be one of your favorite things? It depends on how you see it. It depends on your perspective. It depends on what you understand about it. Deep, personal, intimate connection. This just makes any drug look lame, you know? Most of us are terrified of experiencing it. And that is mostly because of what I'm saying. You don't have a sense of this, you know? So I want to talk about, because I'm going to do a talk actually on authentic personal power, because it's so important. By the way, I'm doing a talk on anxiety in about a month, and then authentic personal power. Authentic personal power finds itself in every talk I have, in every meeting I had in the office or anything like that, because it's so fundamental. So I'm going to talk about it just for a couple seconds here, again, to kind of give a nuanced feel for what I'm talking about. Because a lot of times you could hear that phrase, and you could say, oh, he's talking about self-esteem. That's what he's talking about. You feel good about yourself. You can move and shake. You can deal with things. And no, I'm not talking about self-esteem. Self-esteem's fantastic. It's very much like boundaries, useful at its time. But it's not what I'm talking about. It's more than that. Self-esteem is contingent. I'm telling you that there's a power inside of you that is beyond all of that stuff. All of this trivial things. There's a power inside of you that can withstand everything. That can take it all in, spit it all out. You know, maybe spit it all out isn't the right way, but churn it all out into, you know, something else too. That's the beautiful part. And another thing that, you know, I'm kind of off, but another thing that you'll find as you enter into deeper authentic power is there's less and less need to actually avoid anything. They don't show up. Force senses power and runs typically. When you have enough authentic power, those things just, they find their way somewhere else. It's kind of like the law of attraction thing. They don't vibe together, you know? So when you're in a place of real power, all the other stuff tends to go somewhere else. You know, you're not finding the drama in your life so much anymore. It doesn't resonate anymore. It doesn't have a home in you. Again, authentic personal power is not self-esteem. It's not contingent. What else is it now? Like, I can't even remember now. But it's, there's a list. You'll have to come to the other talk. But authentic personal power is the real goods. And authentic personal power is the thing that runs the whole show. That's why it's power, not force. Force is a weak substitute for power, you know. So power is the thing that runs the whole show. And it runs, this is back to this sentence too, if you think about it. Like, though I am not you, I am not separate than you. What does that mean? It means what I'm talking about, actually. There's a power between us, within us, that we share, that connects us, that makes us, that always finds the thing that's the same in each other, not the differences. And that's the beautiful thing about that, because though I am not you, it acknowledges I'm not you, but I'm not separate from you either. Welcome. It's a very important thing to realize. And believe it or not, this is pretty much my talk. So I would be really happy and excited to take, any questions. If anybody has any things that you'd like to further explore. There is a list, by the way, and I'm not going to get into this a lot, but there is a list in the pamphlets that I handed out. Actually, yeah, I would probably cue that list there. There's a few things. I talk about, I give you the diagram, and then there's this list, which is sort of the white picket fence, barbed wire fence in its own way. And what I'm trying to do is give you a way to maybe work with this a little bit, which is to say you leave here, and it's important. Awareness is everything, right? Awareness is everything. So to be aware of how is it that I put up boundaries is incredibly important, because it starts with awareness. And I talk about this in this thing too, so you can actually just read that. But I do the list here. You might want to pay attention to if you're somebody who needs to be right all the time. This is a way that you are personally avoiding being vulnerable. Is it possible, if you go down the list below, that maybe instead you could just listen a little bit more instead of push your view and need to be right? On the other side of that, by the way, there's spectrums. They're like the two sides of a spectrum on these things. So like needing to be right and disengagement. Like I don't need to give my opinion at all. I'm just going to completely stand out of this and listen to you and nod my head and So if you're that kind of person, maybe you should try engaging a little bit, right? Perfectionism. I don't know how many of you know that one, but I can say, sometimes can be that way. Oh, actually, by the way, I never need to be right, but that's why I feel justified to stand up here and tell you how everything is. So, on the flip side of that is apathy, right? There's control. You can feel the same sort of rhythm in these, right, from one side to the other, and submission, stubbornness, meekness. You could look at this, and I encourage you to read it, check it out, and watch. It's fun too, not to judge, but it's fun to watch it in other people too. You can say, oh, I see what they're doing. They're trying to avoid that, Especially too, I don't know if anyone's ever experienced that when you actually do engage with somebody, if they're not comfortable with that, you're going to find one of these things happen. And of course there's more. But so then on the second to last sheet, I believe it is, I gave some, Brene Brown, by the way, who I'm embarrassed because I did have a quote from her I didn't even talk about, but she is the queen of vulnerability, right? I mean, she's the reason that word is quite a catchword these days, catchphrase these days. Like vulnerability is it, and it's because of her. That's what I think. So I gave a list of some of her books, so not all of them, but that's something that if you wanted to engage in this some more, explore deeper aspects of vulnerability, and her thing's not my thing, of course, but they cross paths, they dovetail together, I think. She has a great Netflix series show right now, or whatever it is, documentary talk, whatever. And and then I actually do suggest, because I did talk about there are other ways in which we can build authentic personal power, which, as I've already espoused, this whole thing is like, that's what it's all about. Irregardless of your personality type, be quiet once in a while. Sit still. I give a real brief, kind of almost it's too simplified in a certain way, but it's a quick guide on what you could do for 10, 20 minutes. And the reason that we do this too, there's many, and so one of these days I will definitely do a talk or a workshop on meditation, because it's an incredible tool. I don't care what you believe or where you're, it's been proven over and over and over again how useful meditation is on all fronts. So, and there's all kinds of meditation that gets a little confusing. But one of the main things you're trying to do with meditation, I would say one of the two main things. One is relax. We have a hard time doing that these days as human beings. To shut down for a moment. And the funny thing is when we do that, I think I say that in the thing a little bit, often things come up. You know, that's part of why we're always avoiding doing it, being quiet. Stuff comes up. You know, they say shit floats to the top. You know. We don't have to do anything about it. That's the beautiful thing about meditation. You don't actually have to do anything about it. You just take a look at it. And you let it be, and you move on. You take another breath. You know. So one of the things we do is we settle down a little bit. And the next thing that we do, that we also don't do that often, is we focus. We focus in on the moment. Our brains are scattered. They're all over the place. Meditation offers a space in which we can pull it in just for a moment. And the power of that, it's kind of like what a laser is, right? You know, you take all this light and you focus it in, you hone it into a very detailed spot. When you get good at meditation, that's what happens. And it's very powerful. And you want to talk about building authentic personal power, because you learn stuff about yourself that you had no clue. No clue. And I don't know if you can learn it any other way. I think being quiet, taking the time, you know. So that was another thing that I mentioned in there. And I also did say, you know, book a session. Book a session with the Know Thyself Project. My wife's an energy worker. I'm a life coach. So we love doing it, and I'd love to see you guys. I also do want to say I am accepting donations only because I did have to pay for this place. And there's an email list. So I would appreciate, even if I have your email, if you sign up on the email list, I would appreciate it. Just so that way I'm not going to flood you with anything. But I could let you know when these kinds of things are going on. And more than that, I want to keep people updated on some of the more exciting things I have, even like the book. And I do have some meditations that I've already recorded. I just haven't actually, I got too many things going on. So, but, you know, I would let people know that too, you know, like they're available. I'm not going to be charging for them. It'll be on the website and that kind of stuff. So just stuff like that. So if you would sign up on the email list, I'd greatly appreciate it. I really thank you for your time. Any questions? Yes. Yeah.
Which can almost be like more terrifying than being vulnerable with others.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, do you have any like tips for like how to really like just start it the right way?
Yeah, I do. You know, don't do Zen practice right away. That would be, which is like kind of the most austere, you know, the really face yourself. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you know what I mean by that. You know, where there is almost no sort of, there's no sort of structure in a way. You just sit there and be quiet, breathe, you know, count your breaths, you know, that kind of thing, right? Maybe not so much that. You could do guided meditations. You could do meditations because you're just warming yourself up. It's just like becoming porous, right? With the, you know, like you don't want to leap in too fast. Why, too? It's just like this because it's so useful. Don't run away from it. Find a way to stay with it. Does that make sense in a way? So find a way that works, that you'll be doing it a year from now. Does that make sense? And a year from now, maybe you'll try a little Zen, you know? But it's probably not the best place to start, you know, especially if you're somebody who feels that a lot. If you're feeling an inner vulnerability, first of all, it shows that you're a very sensitive person, which I know that about you. And that sounds, I actually don't even like the way that sounded as it came off my mouth, because it sounds almost like, you know, you're a sensitive person, you know. No, but I mean, it's beautiful. You're a sensitive instrument. You know that. We've talked, you know, like, you're a sensitive instrument. It means you take it in a lot. That's a beautiful thing. You just got to figure out how to, you know, got to get some bottom to that pyramid, you know. You know what I mean? So you can handle all the stuff that wants to come in, that you're able to pick up. So guided meditations. picking, I know it sounds cheesy, but it really is beautiful and it's amazing. Like imagining yourself on the beach kind of thing. And you simplify it. Or, if that doesn't do it for you, a walk in the woods, whatever that thing that turns you on, that's easier for you to imagine, to pull yourself into, to feel and taste. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, so that it's actually a sensorial sort of experience where you're, oh my God, I could get going here, but, and that's because, no, is that bad? That's because we need to realize, and part of what you'd be learning through that, not exactly the two things I talked about, but you'll be learning that the inner world is as real as the outer world. And that's a very powerful thing to understand. So when you can, do you have something? Did you want to?
Well, that's just funny. Like, I feel like I'm always hearing the opposite of that. Like, your inner world or your perception of things is so different from like
Yeah.
reality or the outside world.
Yeah,
But like, I feel like that's a huge boundary.
it is.
It closes you off from really understanding the connection between the two.
It does. Say it again, would you? Do you remember? No, the very beginning, where you feel like everyone's always saying
Oh,
that you're...
just scroll past 10 years in Oh, I don't know. I just feel like even like when I'm at school and I'm like learning more like psychological things, and people tend to really focus on like understanding that like what you feel inside or like what you see and how you perceive it can be so warped sometimes that like you almost can't trust yourself.
Hmm,
And like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to describe.
that's a lot.
Yeah. And
That's a
I'm
lot.
kind of like, okay, I can kind of see where you're going with that, but like that's awful.
It's scary too, right? Because how do I know?
Right.
Like, man, I could be totally schizophrenic. I don't even realize it, right? No, I know. Mm. No. It's very important. I mean, if you think about the beginning of the talk, that was the beginning of the talk. Like, it does matter. It has a profound, incredible effect, whether you enjoy the roller coaster or not. Right? That's a perception. That's a perspective. That's what that is. There's nothing else there. There's nothing else there. That's the point. The roller coaster sits there. Do you dig it? Do you hate it? Vast world difference from those two things. This is why there is a truth within you, within you. And being quiet, finding it in a pace that works, though, in a pace that works for you. Because again, we want to be doing it 10 years from now. And at this point, am I, like, God, if I don't get my hour meditation in the morning, I'm fine. It doesn't affect me, but I'm bummed a little bit, right? Because I love it, It's like that. So, and I do Zen pretty much, for the most part, right? I mean, I'm just saying, so it's like, it's austere, right? I mean, what's the big deal? What are you getting at? There is, though. The point is, you want to be doing it 10 years from now, and inside of you is our answers to the questions, They're there. You just got to be willing, and you got to know how, I mean, I think a lot of us do that. Like, we try to conquer it all in one blow. I mean, we just want to be done with it, right? Are we done yet? That's right? I mean, anyways. Any more questions? What's up?
David Peters asks, how can we practice vulnerability?
How can we practice vulnerability? That's a good question, David. So, again, I would say, first, be aware that there is something to gain from it. So open to the willingness to feel vulnerability. So that's the first thing. Before you step out of the house, so to speak, again, this is why being quiet for a little bit kind of can do that. You can kind of prepare yourself in a way. You can say, you're not saying anything necessarily. You can do that. By the way, that's another thing, too. There's affirmations. There's all kinds of things you can do like that to start working your way to it. Anyways, I would say first, find within yourself a willingness to be vulnerable. that alone will open the door, the floodgates if you're not careful, for ways in which you can experience vulnerability and practice it. So then once you're willing, I would say feel your way through it, which is to say, it's just like working out, right, Josh? You know, do you lift 300 pounds right away? Right. That would be a really stupid thing to do. So, but at the same time, if you're not feeling a burn from your experience, from your trying to practice this vulnerability thing, if you're not feeling any burn from it, any discomfort in a way, then you're not doing it. So you got to find a place where you're just doing enough. You're feeling a little discomfort, maybe a little bit of that burn. And you should also probably do that with somebody that you can trust. That's a very, very important thing. Right? Again, you probably don't want to do it with a coworker that's been your arch enemy for the last 5 years. That person's going to just, great, this is a great way to throw you under the bus. I can't wait. They're not going to try. You know what I think of it? I was actually going to talk about this too. It reminds me of the scripture of Jesus throwing pearls to swine. Now, I can guarantee you not a single one of you are married to a swine. Even if you think you are. You didn't marry them because they were swine. So I'm not talking about that person almost for sure. There are always exceptions to that, so I apologize if there's somebody that is. But it's very rare. It's very rare. So you're not going to be really throwing pearls to that. You're not going to be wasting pearls on that person is what I'm trying to say. But your coworker might be. You don't have that kind of connection. Brene Brown does a great job talking about this too, how you earn trust, how a relationship is built. And you do this little by little. And I'm not going to get into her. She has her thing. I think if you watch the show, the special, did she talk about that? She didn't. The Marvels? It's in the book. Yeah. It's a process, anyways, where you build this ability to be vulnerable with a person. And of course, if you've done this with a person, this is a fantastic relationship. This is a fantastic relationship where you can be vulnerable. And funny enough, married for 21 years, fantastic relationship, it still doesn't feel that great to be vulnerable with her. I still have to feel the burn and tell me it isn't true for you. Right? That's the funny thing about it. And that's the thing. It's like they put a little barrier on there that just tried to see if you're serious about it. Yeah, go ahead.
In your mind, when you talk about vulnerability, is that in your mind akin to humility? Or is it different for everybody?
No, that's fantastic.
Vulnerability could be lots of things. How do we define it?
Yeah, no. That's a great question. I'm going to say it again just in case, because I don't think they could hear you on the. So he asked me, what's the difference between vulnerability and humility, or are they the same?
The sense that you have when you say vulnerability, is it akin in your mind to humility? Because in defining a word, it can mean a lot of different
Oh yeah, of course.
and it could mean different things to different people.
I think it's a fantastic question, by the way. And why? Because it's nuanced. I love it. It's subtle. I love this. But I do think that you're not going to experience vulnerability without humility. I do think that. This is part of what we don't like. This is part of what certain, the barbed wire fence doesn't like it, right? The meek person, funny enough, embraces that humility in a certain strange way, but they twist it. They warp it. They warp humility into something else. So, but I do. So I don't know if it answers your question exactly, but I think humility is almost like an action, and vulnerability is an experience. They're something like that, maybe.
There's a lot of ways you can approach it. One of the ways that it's approached is not just humility, but even dying to self.
Sure.
Or learning to be still.
Sure.
That goes into your meditation. Free your mind from all this stuff.
Right.
So and it will leave you vulnerable, but also molded.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it leaves you open. That's the thing, right? It leaves you open. And that's the scary part about it, by the way, right? That's the scary part about it when you're open. This is you see what I mean? Now, again, so humility and vulnerability are definitely two sides of the same coin, I think, in a certain way. I don't see there's a way around it in my mind. Yeah, no, and I think it's an important thing. And I think if you're going to, By the way, so if you're a invisible fence one or a barbed wire fence, which are the two polar opposites, you think you're right. That's the truth. Believe it or not. And even the person who's the invisible fence, who seems like they're always willing to not be right, they have a certain sense inside of themselves that they know what's right. And they're not willing to let go of that. That's where humility comes in. Without being willing to let go of that, because this is the right way to do it. Without being willing to let go of that, to enter into humility in that way, you're not going to experience the vulnerability. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be willing to be wrong, to not know. You and I were talking about that.
It's like the pearls in this wine. The pearl's not necessarily a pearl, but it's something of value that this wine doesn't recognize.
That doesn't recognize it, exactly.
This wine is a big thing. It's not.
No, exactly.
But if you have something to offer somebody and you feel strongly about it, if they don't recognize it, you can't give it to them.
That's right. No, that's right. No, that's absolutely right. At some point in the office with just about everybody, it always comes down to, do you really want to change? Do you really want to do something about this? Because if you're not open, if you're not willing, if you're not looking, if you're not serious even about it, then there's nothing I can do. You're closed. You have to really be open. You have to really be willing. A funny thing that Steve and I were talking about too is one of my favorite things, and this might sound off subject a little bit, but it's counterintuitive, and I'm going to say it and I'll let go. We always think it's about getting. I actually just did a video about this. I think I released it. We always think it's about getting. It's about gaining. Like right now, you're gaining knowledge. I would rather that's not so much. I would rather that what you got out of this is that you were all of a sudden realized, hey, letting go might be an interesting thing to do. Being vulnerable, opening, letting go of the thing that I think is right, of the way that I think it should be. This is how we really grow. It's not an addition. It's actually a peeling away. This is how we expose the beautiful work of art from the wood or the stone. It's in there all the time, like you said. It's always inside that thing, inside of us, the power. But we have so much stuff on it, and we're so attached to all this stuff. What life is trying to do, if we'll let it, it's the feeling of vulnerability, that's that burn, is it peels a little something away to expose who we really are. Anybody else?
I have a thing.
Yeah, what's your thing?
So this is so crazy, because on Wednesday,
Okay.
Charlie's gonna hate me for saying all this, but my mom stormed into my house. My brother was in the hospital, and she was doing a lot to take care of him, the family,
Mm-hmm.
and her blood pressure was just like through the roof, and having to do all that taking care of stuff. And she storms into my house and says, "All right, I just need to tell you, I need to set boundaries with all my children right now."
Okay.
For my health. And I'm seeing it's because she was facing this exact thing, but she doesn't really see it. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was so vulnerable and having to care for everyone. And like, then her instinct is like, her blood pressure is high, and like, she's like trying to cut it back
Sure.
to protect herself. And I just think it's amazing because I was just kind of coasting along her experience and being like, okay, but now like I have words to it
No.
that make perfect sense and
Well,
demonstrates like our family dynamic in general.
well, what would that be?
Boundaries.
Yes.
The boundaries are there. Someone has a crisis. The boundaries have to come down for a time, and then quick to jump back in and put them right back up again.
Sure.
But then how it came across was really strange to me in looking at it, because it's like, I need to make boundaries. So I want to set this thing where we see each other once a week, which we haven't been for like ever.
Yeah.
So like, she wants the boundaries, but then she wants more vulnerability at the same time. It's like this battle inside of her.
Yeah, it probably is too, because think about it, because you're saying, just to make sure I understand, your family is very used to boundaries.
Oh yeah.
That's how it functions. It's like, you don't go past there, and you don't. Yeah. So then all of a sudden they get tore down, and she's forced into this experience, some of which I bet was good, funny enough, even though there's trauma and drama, but then it's overwhelmed. This is the point about doing too quick, right? I mean, it's too much, too fast. I mean, she's got no sense of authentic power in her family, ironically, right? A place where you would think you would sense, well, that's what we hope to do, right, with our kids.
They're weak on the power.
Yeah.
They're very
Good on the force. Yes.
Go through your list right here, like we're all on like the left. You know? So like, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But now I have to sort of process everything that you said when I deal with her because I'm like, I want to sort of let her see this. You know,
Yeah.
she's 75 years old and like, do you want this vulnerability? Can you
Well,
handle it?
remember the person who took the walk. It works that way. Make yourself vulnerable to the point where you're comfortable, or maybe not so comfortable, right? Push yourself. Be the example, and you'll be shocked. She's your mom, right? She loves you. She don't know how all the time, but she loves you, right? I mean, so if you do that, that's another thing I don't think I said, and I say this all the time. That was the point of the story about the person who takes the walk. We do this, we do it for the whole world. We do this for the whole world. We start letting boundaries down in the whole world every time we do it. We encourage other people to do it. We show it's okay. We show it's not weakness, by the way. The thought that it's weakness is just ridiculous, right? I mean, Brene Brown makes that point the best, I think. You know, like all innovation, all creation, everything like that comes from vulnerability. The moment you create something and you share it with the world is a moment of vulnerability. If nobody did that, we'd be nowhere, right? That's not weak. That's courage. That's power. Again, think about it. Everything, all the stuff, right, comes from somebody being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to be wrong. How many times did Edison ruin the light bulb? You know what I mean? Kind of silly stuff like that. It's like, that's how it comes. I would. You got a prime opportunity. My friend says, what does he say? What is it? It's, I just said it. Oh, if Sage's not here. It's, I can't think of the acronym, but it's another fucking opportunity for growth. But, you know, it's kind of a little snarky, but there's truth to it, right? I mean, when we see things, that's the part about the perspective too, right? When we can shift the perspective like that enough, that's what we see. That's what we see from our parent or from our coworker, or we see an opportunity. It's one of my favorite parts. It really is. Anybody else? This is why I was trying to wrap it up. See, we're almost this good. I'm going to be like an hour. Yeah.
Kent Laundry asks, how can we get to the point where I want to be vulnerable and not be afraid of it?
How can I get to the point where I want to be vulnerable? Well, I feel like I'm repeating myself, meaning maybe I'm not, I probably should find another way. But I would say, again, it's about pacing yourself. So I don't know you, so I don't know if you have a close friend or if you're married or, you know, by the way, you know what I didn't talk about? And I love this, and I'm so glad. I appreciate the question. You can be vulnerable. I've talked about this so many times with a coffee mug. I love my coffee mug. And I know it sounds so trivial, but I have an intimate connection with my coffee mug. It's a good place to start because it doesn't talk back, it doesn't cause all kinds of problems, but I can open myself to that experience. Now, that's ridiculous, it's silly. No, it's not. I really enjoy my coffee mug. And you know what? Why is that an act of vulnerability? Because it could break. Because my son takes it a lot and keeps it in his room, and I can't find my favorite coffee mug. It's a true thing, though. I mean, this is real stuff. Now, it doesn't, exactly. It doesn't, it's not on the level of a marriage or, you know, even a co-working relationship. But this is a place that we can start. If you have an animal friend, be vulnerable. Open yourself. That animal is always there for you to do that. And you experience vulnerability and you open yourself to it. Now, don't forget, vulnerability has to burn a little bit. So pick something that is somehow maybe in the line of what I'm talking about and try to make it burn a little bit. And you'll see you survive through it, you know.
Does your coffee mug make you burn?
Well, It does when my son has it, you know? No, well, yeah, right. Oh, no, that's you're taking the pun too. Yeah, I'm sorry. And I just totally missed it. You see, that's how thick I am. Anyways, how can you want to become vulnerable? I would what?
What can you gain from it, maybe other than authentic personal power, in case that people, since you don't have an exact definition for that term today or whatever,
Yeah.
what can you gain from it? Like, what's the end point that's exciting about it? Like,
Well, again, a deep intimate connection. So in other words, even with my coffee mug, I mean, I know I hope that doesn't sound trite. I don't mean to, but or my animal, I mean, I was just saying this to somebody in the office the other day, we have a lot of animals. We have 4 cats and 3 dogs. So when I meditate, it rarely is by myself. I always end up with a cat on my lap or 2 or a dog on my feet or whatever. So when I'm done, funny enough, I'm in this great place. I open my eyes, and there they are, somebody inevitably. And I open myself because I'm in that space, and I have a deep, intimate connection with that animal, and in a way that I can't quite express. But it's an intimacy that's beyond your normal, everyday exchange. And that part of that is because I see in that animal what I see inside myself, ironically. So now, what does this have to do with anything that you're asking me? There's a way through situations like that we can find a sense of ourself, the authentic power, which is elusive a little bit, exactly what I mean. But we find a sense of ourself that's stable, that's real, that's universal, by the way. I don't know if I pointed that out. That's one of the attributes in that way. Like, though I am not you, I'm not separate than you. There's something between us that's the same. That's power, actually, funny enough. It's that when I say it keeps the whole show going, I mean it. It keeps the whole show going. So I would look for opportunities. What's up? I would look for opportunities like that. Keep it simple. And see if you can't just work your way into, I don't know if you're married or if you have a relationship, but that sort of thing, there's always opportunities for that. And I know it doesn't feel good. I think another thing to do too is to remember, and I guess this takes a little faith, I think you and I were talking about that, but that there is something on the other side. There is something on the other side of the burn. And I think we all have experienced that to some degree or another. Whenever you've done that, I don't care if it was when you were 10 years old and you were sitting in your room and you were sharing your baseball cards or whatever you were doing and you were just having that moment. It was so precious in its own weird way, But at that moment, you're very vulnerable. It could have been 2 minutes later, your friend, called you an asshole and stormed out. But that doesn't cheapen that moment that you shared. That's the ironic thing. And you couldn't have shared it and experienced it without being vulnerable. Yes?
I think it's also useful when you talk about shifting your perspective. Like, how do you feel when somebody's vulnerable with you?
That's
You
great.
don't think less of them. You actually become
So
closer.
true, Chris. Yeah. I want to say it again just because I don't think he could hear you. Yeah. But he said, when you experience vulnerability from somebody else, you never think less of them. You always think that was quite a remarkable thing to experience, right?
They're very brave.
Very brave, exactly. The absolute opposite of, I love that. That is so true, Chris. That's spot on. No, that's spot on. Yeah.
What about the nasty word expectations?
Ooh.
I know I've definitely had experiences with people where I really wish I could have that
Yeah.
vulnerable, I almost expect it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's almost forcing me to miss it, or if maybe my expectations are putting pressure on them that they kind of feel and are ugh.
That's an interesting thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And Brene Brown does some great stuff with this. Have you ever read her or seen her? Yeah. Anyway, I don't mean to, but I do recommend it because it will help you. She has all kinds of categories or metaphors, if you will, for people in the ways that they do. They grab. She has a smash and grab, she calls it, I think, something like that, where somebody's they're trying to get connection, intimacy with you by, sharing too much at once. Like, I was molested when I was a kid, and you just met him, and you're like, what the hell, like you're not, maybe that's almost too vulnerable, right? My daddy liked it, whoa, I mean, So does that make any sense in that way? Where I'm not saying that you did that, by the way, but I'm just saying though that that's one of those. I use the extreme to try to point out something in the fact that somebody could feel like that, even though you didn't do anything like that. But it's too much. It's too much for them, right? So one is they just may not be the person, right? But
I've felt it both ways, obviously, but
what do you mean?
like I've felt like pressure on myself to be more vulnerable than other people, and I've also felt like I may have been a little too wanting of other people to be vulnerable too, that they probably felt.
Yeah. No, I think too, again, a sensitive person, I know my wife and I experience this a lot. You desperately want it, actually. Like, I crave it, And it's not the way the world works, It's all surface. It's all the very top layer of the onion, Steve, Which is very dry. And, yes, exactly. I mean, this is the way that most of the world operates, though. I mean, they're very stuck on that layer.
Well,
And
I
yeah, no, what?
I have actually been practicing this in my life for the last 6 months or a year maybe. It's just like when you go to Wegmans, there's the cashier there. How hard is it to say, what are you doing there? Or how's your day going?
Yeah.
And I always drives this one crazy, but I always try rolling the eyes.
Did that drive you crazy?
I always try to, because that is
You would hate to be my kid, too, I tell you.
yeah, because I think we talked about this in a
Yeah.
different talk.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Talk to your cashier. Like, it's vulnerable.
It is.
Like, they're a human being, and they usually...
It's a relationship. You're having a relationship with that person. You don't think of it that way. That's what I was saying, if you remember. Yeah, it is a good baby step, so to speak, right? Make yourself vulnerable. Which, you think about that level of vulnerability. It's pretty small, but most of us don't take it. I know. I know.
And it makes me, my dog, like, talk about vulnerable. He's laying on the couch. I walk up to him. His tail is wagging, and he's on his back.
Oh, yeah.
Just waiting.
He's all yours.
Yeah.
All yours. Totally surrendered.
And, like, how cool is that? He
It's
has
beautiful.
nothing's holding him.
I'm going to say that again, too. So this woman just said that her dog is the most vulnerable creature she knows, right? He's laying on the couch on his back, belly up, tail wagging, and what a beautiful sight, right? What a beautiful experience. I mean, I agree. And this is the thing this is what I would say, vulnerability warriors, I don't know, whatever. Like, let's go out there and do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a real thing and it's needed. This breaks down walls and boundaries, by the way.
Shelley, I'm going to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Shelley said this too, that it shows trust on both sides.
It does.
To go up to your cashier and ask them about their day shows that you're trusting them in a way.
Yeah.
And if they respond openly to you, that shows that they're trusting.
One of my favorites is the ones that don't. I love it. That's like, oh, so well, And, I told that story about the woman in Lowe's, that like just all of my contractor friends were terrified of her, and, because she's just she was wench. I mean, she really was hard to deal with, and never got anything. But I just was like, I was determined. I'm not letting that. I know that, see, this is the thing though, and I'm not, but there's a sense. I have a sense of it. And I know that there's something in there. I don't doubt it for a second. So I'm in. I'm in for the haul. I'm going to pull it out. And then I still see her. I don't do as much there anymore, but big smile. Hey, and that's not her personality. You could just see hey, it's like such a wonderful thing, It took a year or more. Yeah.
From a perspective of a life coach or a counselor,
Yeah.
have you seen a situation where you can actually help somebody or put them in a position where the facade comes down, the wall comes down, something that they didn't see coming,
Yeah.
just a facade.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's the way they protect themselves.
Sure.
They're fearful, so they put on this really hard face.
Yeah.
But there's an aerial obstacle course that we've taken through.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And they don't trust anybody, especially the guys they're living with. So now you got these kids 40 foot in a tree, new experience. The facade has to come off and they have to trust people.
Sure.
They've actually been forced into a situation
Oh, vulnerability.
of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
So you can put somebody in a position, if you know them or where they're coming from, if you know the walls that they've constructed and they want to really have those walls come down. And it's, when you get to see an experience like that where people maybe have a life experience and get on their knees for the first time,
Yeah.
they're humble, they're vulnerable,
Yeah.
they're broken, that could be a starting point.
Absolutely. You know, this is a great.
Ways to get there.
No, no, absolutely, and I will. Do you remember? I don't want you to forget. Okay, so this is all things are like this. It's all riding a bicycle, or I should say, learning how to. So you fall, right? And you know, an experience like that is absolutely getting on the bicycle. It may be the first time. Actually, the reality is, it's never the first time. I mean, we've all been vulnerable so many times, right? It's how we know to avoid it. but the point is, though, that to get on, and you know, that's the first ride, right? It was bam. But to see that there's something to be gained from it so that you get back on, that's the willingness. Because you're not going to gain anything. In other words, that could just be a flash in the pan experience, right?
For those kids, it was something that you could see that there was so much more there
Yeah,
in that person than you thought.
yeah.
Because their facade, their walls, their mask came off
Yeah,
because of the situation they were in. And it actually gave you an opportunity to cast that hook
yeah.
because they were
That's interesting. I see what you're
noticing it.
Mm-hmm.
They could see and they wanted
Yeah,
to gain something
yeah,
that was advantageous.
yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. And it's true. I mean, those moments are profound. That's what I'm trying to tell you, too. And I think everybody knows it here. But to actually do it, to try it, you know, to work with it, to see it as a practice, if you will. Go ahead. All right.
I was just going to say, vulnerability can start with something as simple as smiling at someone. It's something that we
It's
don't
true.
do enough of. We put our heads down, we're walking through the store, but if you just make that effort to look someone in the
Yeah.
eye and smile at them, it's a vulnerable, you have to be vulnerable in order to do that. You don't know what their reaction's going to be. It could be like, and many a times that is the
Yeah,
reaction.
absolutely.
I've made it a point in my life to try to, and it's always so heartwarming when someone kind of like unexpectedly, oh, she smiled at me, and you can see
Oh,
it in their
yeah.
face, and you
Oh,
can
yeah.
respond to it. There's not enough warmth.
In the car. Have you ever tried it in the car? That casual, you know? It's an interesting...
You as a guy, that's got to be interesting.
No, I do, because I do that. Yeah, I'm sure you can imagine. That's my practice. I mean, it's a gift, too. It's a gift.
It is a vulnerability, and it's a nice way to start understanding what vulnerability is and
Yeah.
overcoming it. Even that very simple act of just smiling or saying, opening the door for someone and saying something, oh, no, whatever. But doing that and being sincere about wanting to
Yes, that's
that
another one.
person, not
Right.
just
And again, I want to point out, this is the thing that it comes up again in the office a real lot, in the books a lot when I'm writing. Being conscious of it is incredibly important. It's like if you took an equation, it would be it'd be like if you change the plus symbol to a multiplication symbol. So if that makes sense, I know it may be a little too heady, but the point is that if you're conscious of what you're doing, you know, not just, you know, I'm in a good mood and I'm smiling and, oh, look, people smile back and that's just what's going on. No, but if you're consciously working this, it multiplies. It's, instead of it just being like an addition, it's like times 10. That's the willingness part too, like, right? You be vulnerable and not get shit out of it. You know, be put in a place of vulnerability, you know. That consciousness and willingness is really, really important. And that's part of how to work with it. That's the only reason I want to point that out too, because if you're conscious too, by the way, Leah, to say like, even if you don't actually quite understand authentic personal power, I'm not saying you don't, but I'm just saying if somebody doesn't, to be conscious that there's a goal like that. You know, we don't know what California looks like until we get there, right? So we start heading west. If that makes any sense. Is this too abstract? I mean, the point is, the goal is authentic personal power. We don't quite know what it is, but we work our way towards it by trying this and trying that and being conscious about this and being conscious about that, pulling awareness in, like, hey, am I trying to fit in here? And am I fitting in? Is that a way of avoiding vulnerability? You know, it's one of the things on the list, like taking a look at that. Anyways. Anybody else? This is great.
I think I like the idea of just being more playful about it.
Yeah.
Like not even having an end goal, just be like, what'll happen if I do this? Like
You would like that.
yeah, 'cause that seems fun.
It is fun, though. It is fun, of course. I hope I'm making it sound like a drag. Is that what I'm doing?
Well, it's orange slice that we're aiming for.
Yeah, no, it is fun. I mean, not always, of course.
Right.
And that's where I would, inevitably, we have to cross through the border of not fun if we really want to get somewhere. Nobody wants to hear it, but it's true.
I was just going to say another, it's not so simple, but another way to sort of dive into vulnerability would be in the practice of being able to apologize.
Oh, my God.
But just being able to, to say you're sorry and really mean it and really see your part in it and really see the need to say it. Like embracing all of that and then just actually going, I'm sorry and I messed up.
No, this is my mother, so she's just nailing to the floor. I'm sorry. No. Okay, so here, because you just brought up something so important, actually. We are not going to succeed at being vulnerable very often, especially as we're just trying it out, That is the greatest opportunity but we are trying to, in a fun way, pull in awareness, and so we're trying to be, very casual and fun about it. But no, but the point is, have an exchange with our spouse. There was zero vulnerability going on. We realized that we want to work on vulnerability. It's done. It's gone. It happened. It wasn't even a big deal. It wasn't even, but it happened. You knew it. You wished you had done it a little differently. You chose one of these boundaries instead of vulnerability. It's all done. That. Hey, especially the ones that weren't that big of a deal. Like, honey, I know. No, you can have the chocolate. I didn't need it, whatever, I mean, no, okay, not that one. I went too far. I didn't mean to go, no, not the chocolate. I don't, yeah. I'll clean up the dog poop tomorrow. I know. I say take it slow, and then I go to chocolate right away. What a hypocrite. She just takes the thing and throws it away now. No, so, but I want to be, it's fun to laugh, but it was such a good point, because that's a way in which we can, and I know it's hard to want to be vulnerable, but if we find value in it, that's a great way to start building it. Pick a small thing. Yeah, pick a small thing. I flubbed that up. I wished it was different. I wasn't vulnerable, but I have another opportunity. This is my favorite part about life. It's a new moment right now. Oh, and it's another new moment, by the way. What? Yeah.
No, I think Daniel's exactly right just by smiling. You've chosen to take a step to show love toward another person.
Yeah. And you may not get it back.
Without really that expectation. And sometimes I'll just say to people randomly, well, keep looking up. And some people even might go, well, geez, that's great. And then the other person will go, well, stop it.
Yeah. Look up to this. No, I know. Yeah, you just brought it up again too, and expectations came up. And so, as I've taught many times and talked about many times, intention is far more powerful than expectation. So to have an intention. Now, it's an interesting thing too because if your intention is vulnerability, let's say, you do have to put it out there. You're going to feel a burn. You're going to feel a burn. You're not going to avoid that by shifting the word from expectation to intention. Now, I'm not going to feel burn. Do you see what I'm trying to point out there? Like, you could say, well, I burned it because I had expectations. Now I have intentions. Well, you could hide behind intentions as in, I don't give shit now, right? And that's not going to burn then. So the intention, though, is much more nuanced, which is what I love about it, and much more powerful in that way because it doesn't matter what that person returns with your smile or your comments, but your intention is put it out there.
Successful, I guess in my mind, it's like God is less interested in what you do than why you do it.
Yes.
So he looks at the heart, all right? So
Yeah.
if your heart is right, your intentions are right, what you give back, I mean, it'd be nice if everybody was raised up in the experience
Yeah, of course.
reaching out and showing love to somebody, but not everybody, they may be that swine that just doesn't get it,
Exactly.
and so keep throwing it out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it leaves you vulnerable, and that's not a bad thing because you're stepping into something that's not only advantageous, but it's that adventure, it's that carnival action.
The fun.
But what are the
You could, yeah.
something good could happen.
And it is, and that's where it's easier in the casual experience too, I mean, if it doesn't turn out the way you want with your wife or your husband, it's not as fun. You're right. But in the casual experience, they set up yours and you said, you could kind of move on. It's not like, there's not such a, and that's a good place to start in that way. You can still move on and move on to the next one. Anyone else? Are we ready to wrap this thing up? If we're ready to wrap this thing up. Oh, wait a minute. I think I got to do this, baby girl. So I've just been obsessed with this song. But I want to thank everybody for coming. And I hope you can make the next talk. And bring a friend, because we need to start the Vulnerability Warriors. We're not going to call it that, I promise. But I'm just saying, we need to start, sharing this stuff in the world, in our. Again, thanks so much. No, I'm not going to say. Are we good? What happened? Something bad happened? You turned it off? Bye-bye. I'm so glad you came.